When my son married a woman I had never trusted, I said nothing. I smiled in the photographs, I danced at the reception, and I kept one very important secret completely to myself. 14 days after that wedding, her brother walked into my hardware store, sat down across from my desk, and slid a manila folder toward me like he was doing me a favor. Inside was a document that said I had voluntarily signed over everything I owned. My home, my business, my land, all of it. He folded his hands on the desk and looked at me the way a man looks at someone he believes has already lost. I looked right back at him and said, "Thank you for bringing this in person." And I meant it. Because what Raymond Kowalski did not know, what none of them knew, was that I had been waiting for exactly this moment for 11 months. Before we go any further, friends, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from, your city, your state, wherever you are tonight. I read every single one. And I want you to know some of the details in this story have been shaped for storytelling purposes. But everything this story teaches you is worth holding on to. My name is Walter Britten. I am 67 years old, a retired electrician who built a hardware and supply store from the ground up in Beaumont, Texas, over the course of 32 years. I drive a truck that is 12 years old because I never saw a reason to drive anything newer. I live in the same house I bought in 1991, a cream-colored colonial on Sycamore Bend Road with a workshop in the back and a vegetable garden along the south fence that my late wife Lorraine started planting in the second year of our marriage and never stopped adding to until the day she had her stroke. Lorraine passed 18 months ago, heart failure, secondary to the stroke, quick and without warning on a Tuesday morning in April while she was sitting in her chair by the kitchen window with her coffee cup still warm on the table beside her. The doctors said she did not suffer. I have held on to that the way you hold on to something, in deep water. My son is named Patrick. He is 34 years old and has his mother's eyes, and I have come to understand very little of her judgment. He met Serena Kowalski at a sales conference in Houston 3 years ago and came home talking about her the way young men talk when they have confused dazzle for substance. I shook her hand at dinner and noticed 3 things in the first 20 minutes. She never asked a question that was not about money. She looked at my store the way appraisers look at property, and when she thought no one was watching, she watched me. I did not say any of this to Patrick. I had learned through 38 years of marriage and 1 divorce that nearly happened in year 4 before Lorraine, and I found our way back to each other, that a father telling his son what to think about the woman he loves is the fastest way to ensure that son stops listening to his father entirely. So I kept my observations where they belonged, behind my eyes, where they could be useful later. The wedding was in October, out on the Kowalski family's rented event ranch west of Beaumont. 240 people, an open bar, a band that played too loud. I stood at the front of that space in my good suit and watched Patrick slide a ring onto Serena's finger, and I told myself the weight in my chest was just what fathers feel when the math of their family changes. That night, driving home alone on the interstate with the radio off, I thought about Lorraine. She had met Serena once, at a Sunday dinner 6 weeks before the diagnosis that eventually took her. She had been quiet during the meal, which was not like her. Lorraine had opinions about everything and expressed them freely and without apology, and her silence that evening was the kind that had weight to it. Afterward, while I was washing the dishes, she had come and stood beside me at the sink and said, in the same voice she used for practical things, "Walter, whatever you have, keep it where she can't find it." I had not asked her what she meant. I already knew. The morning after the wedding, I drove to my attorney's office and spent 3 hours with Howard Fitch, who had been handling my legal affairs for 19 years and who had the particular quality of a man who listens without moving his face. I walked him through what I wanted and why. He listened to all of it, and then he picked up his pen and we got to work. By the end of that week, the hardware store existed inside a limited liability corporation held by a family trust. My home had been moved into a separate, irrevocable trust with specific language about what could and could not trigger a transfer. My savings, which were considerably more than Patrick or anyone in the Kowalski family understood, because Lorraine and I had lived within our means for 38 years and invested the difference with discipline and patience, were restructured behind 3 layers of documentation that did not connect back to my name in any direct way. The picture a stranger would see if they went looking at Walter Britton's finances was a retired electrician with a modest checking account and a small business that appeared to be running on thin margins. And then I waited. For 11 months, I watched. I came to Sunday dinners and I listened, and I noted. Patrick worked in regional sales for a logistics company, and over those months I watched the texture of his money conversations change. Small things first. A comment about overhead costs at the store. A question about whether I had updated my will since Lorraine passed. Then larger things. A suggestion that I might want to consider selling the store and moving somewhere simpler. Easier for you at your age, Dad. He had never said anything like that before Serena. I wrote all of it down in a legal pad I kept in the locked drawer of my workshop desk, dated and specific. Engineer's document. Electrician's document. Men who have spent their lives working with systems that can fail catastrophically have a professional habit of creating records. 3 months before Raymond Kowalski walked into my store, I purchased 2 small audio recorders from a security supply company online. I placed one beneath the workbench counter at the back of the store's office, and one in the living room of my house, secured to the underside of the side table next to my recliner. Not because I knew exactly what was coming, because Lorraine had told me to keep what I had somewhere they could not reach it, and I intended to follow her advice completely. The morning Raymond came in was a Thursday in September. Cool for Beaumont, which meant the kind of morning where the air almost behaves itself before the heat remembers where it is. I was at the back counter going over invoices when I heard the front bell. Raymond Kowalski was Serena's older brother by 6 years, a commercial real estate broker who dressed like the deal was already closed. He had been to the store twice before, both times to talk about things that were not hardware. He sat down across from my desk without being invited. He set the folder on the surface between us and pushed it forward with 2 fingers, slow and deliberate. "I think you're going to want to look at that, Walter." I opened it. A power of attorney document, Knox County notarized, with my signature at the bottom. Beneath it, a property transfer form. Beneath that, a letter on county letterhead advising me that, as the designated holder of my power of attorney, Patrick Britten had authorized the transfer of my residential property and business assets to a newly formed family management trust, effective in 30 days. Patrick's name on a power of attorney I had never signed. I read every page. I read them the way I used to read electrical schematics, not for the parts I expected, but for the parts that did not belong. "We want this to be easy," Raymond said. He had his hands folded on my desk now, the posture of a man who believes the document makes him the authority in the room. "Patrick is concerned about you. He and Serena both are. You're managing a lot on your own out here since Lorraine passed, and the store is, look, Walter, it's a lot for one man. This just puts things in order." "I appreciate the concern," I said. "You've got 30 days to get your personal belongings sorted. Anything in the house you want to keep, anything sentimental, we'll make sure it comes with you." "Where would I be going?" He smiled pleasantly. "There are some excellent assisted living communities in the area. Patrick has already toured a few." I looked at the signature on the power of attorney document. It was very good. Whoever had done it had studied my handwriting carefully, the particular way my capital W sat slightly forward, the consistent pressure I used on the crossbar of the T in Britten. They had studied it enough to get most of the visual details right. But a signature is not just a shape. It is a rhythm. It is the speed of a hand that has signed its own name without thinking about it for 67 years, and there is no way to practice that rhythm into existence from the outside. What I was looking at had been drawn by someone concentrating. I set the folder back on the desk and looked at Raymond Kowalski. "Thank you for bringing this in," I said. "I'll need a few days to go through everything." He nodded. He looked satisfied in the way of a man who believes the hard part is over. "Of course. Take your time." He stood, buttoned his jacket. "We're all on the same side here, Walter. This is about taking care of you." Unquote. "I understand," I said. I walked him to the front of the store, held the door, watched him get into his car and pull out of the lot. Then I walked back to my office, sat down in my chair, and pulled out my phone. Before I called Howard, I thought about the date on that notary seal, October 12th. I pulled the small calendar off my wall and looked at October, the second weekend of the month. I did not need the calendar to confirm what I already knew. The weekend of October 12th. I had been in San Antonio at my cousin Gerald's retirement party. 2 nights, a hotel reservation in my name. 63 people who had seen me there, including Gerald's wife, his pastor, and the wedding photographer who had taken pictures of me in his backyard on the afternoon of the 12th, with a timestamp I could pull up on my phone in 11 seconds. I was 400 miles from Beaumont on the day a notary supposedly watched me sign away my life. I dialed Howard Fitch. He picked up on the second ring and I told him everything in order, the same way I used to brief job supervisors on a site assessment. Facts, sequence, no editorializing. When I finished, Howard was quiet for a moment. "Walter," he said, "you understand that because of the trust restructuring we did last November, this document is pointing at assets that no longer exist in the form they're describing." "I know," I said. "They've forged a document to transfer property that has already been moved. They did their research 11 months too late," I said. Howard made a sound that was not quite a laugh. "What do you want to do?" "I want to understand the full scope before I do anything. I want to know who the notary is. I want to know who prepared the document. And I want to know how far Patrick is actually inside this. I can have a forensic document examiner look at the signature within 24 hours, Howard said. For the notary, I can run the seal against the state registry. For Patrick, I have something that may help with Patrick," I said. I ended the call. I unlocked the bottom drawer of my workshop desk and took out the legal pad. 11 months of dated entries. Then I walked to the back of the store, reached under the workbench counter, and retrieved the audio recorder. I connected it to my laptop and put my headphones on and sat in the quiet of the back office with the September light coming through the single high window. I had not listened to the recording since I placed the devices. I had not wanted to. Part of me had hoped I was wrong about all of it, that the weight I had been carrying since that Sunday dinner was nothing more than a grieving man's suspicion dressed up as instinct. I started the playback. The first 20 minutes were ordinary store sounds. A week of invoices and customer calls and my own voice giving directions to my 2 employees, Marcus and Dale. Then, a Thursday evening, 6 weeks back, the sound of the front bell. Patrick's voice. "Is he in the back?" Marcus's voice. "He's gone for the day. Left about an hour ago." "Good." A pause. Then footsteps moving toward the office. I listened to my son walk through my store, to my office, while I was not there. I listened to the sound of my filing cabinet being opened, drawers pulled, papers shuffled, the particular sound of a man going through things that are not his. I sat very still with my headphones on. The recording captured Patrick on the phone 11 minutes into the search. His voice was lower than usual, compressed in the way of someone who is not sure whether the building is empty. "I found the tax returns. Yeah, from the last 3 years. A pause. "I know, but the numbers here don't match what Ray found in the public filings. Something structured differently than we thought." Another pause, longer. "How long do we have before he'd notice the filing?" A sound I could not immediately identify, the clicking of a pen, perhaps. "She's sure about the notary? Because if the signature doesn't hold, the whole thing," he stopped. All right. Wednesday then." He was out of the store in under 4 minutes. The front bell rang again, and then the recording went quiet. I sat back in my chair and took my headphones off and looked at the ceiling of my back office. The water stain in the corner that I had been meaning to repair for 2 years. The shelf of product catalogs that Lorraine had helped me organize in 1998 and that I had never reorganized because she had a system that worked perfectly and I saw no reason to change it. My son had stood in my store and talked to his wife's brother about forging my signature. The thing I had most hoped was not true had turned out to be exactly true. I put the headphones back on and kept listening. The living room recorder had caught 2 conversations. The first was unremarkable. The second was not. 4 days before Raymond's visit, Patrick and Serena had been at my house for dinner. I remembered the evening pot roast, one of Lorraine's recipes, the one with the carrots and the low-sodium broth that took 4 hours. I had gotten up to check the oven midway through the meal, and when I came back to the table, Patrick and Serena had been talking quietly and stopped when I entered the room. I had assumed they were having a private moment and thought nothing more of it. The recorder thought something of it. Serena's voice, caught while I was in the kitchen. "He doesn't look like a man in cognitive decline. Ray needs to talk to Dr. Mercer again about the documentation." "Patrick, the documentation's fine. Mercer signed what we needed. If he contests it, he's not going to contest it. He's 67, Serena. He lost his wife 18 months ago. He's been managing everything alone. When Ray lays it out for him, he's going to feel relieved. That's how it works. People that age, they want someone to take the wheel. They don't admit it, but they want it. A silence. And the store? Serena asked. At auction, it'll move for $250, maybe $280. The land value alone is worth more than anything he's drawing from it in a year. What about the house? The house goes with the trust. We list it in the spring when the market's better. I stopped the recording. I sat in my office for 3 full minutes without moving. A deliberate silence. The kind that engineers use when a system has failed and the next action matters more than speed. My son had sat across a dinner table from me 3 nights ago and eaten Lorraine's pot roast and looked at me and calculated the auction value of the store his mother and I had built over 32 years. A doctor named Mercer had signed cognitive decline documentation for a man he had apparently never examined. These were not the problems of an hour. These were the problems of a methodical response. I called Howard back. I told him about the recordings. His voice went very still, in the particular way of an attorney who is reassessing the severity of a situation in real time. Walter, fabricated medical documentation to support an elder care petition combined with the forged power of attorney and the unauthorized access to your files. This is a criminal matter, not just a civil dispute. I know, I said. I don't want it handled by a court calendar. I want it handled by Monday. What are you thinking? I told him. When I finished, Howard was quiet for a beat. You want to control the confrontation completely. I want them to walk in Monday morning believing they've won, I said. I want Raymond and Patrick both in the room when they find out they haven't. And Serena? I thought about Lorraine standing at the kitchen sink telling me to keep what I had somewhere safe. I thought about my son's voice on that recording saying that I would feel relieved when someone took the wheel. Serena is the architect, I said. I want her in the room too. Howard got to work. By Saturday morning, his forensic document examiner had confirmed what I already knew. The signature was a forgery, controlled and practiced, without the natural pressure variation of an authentic hand. The notary seal belonged to a man named Gerald Parrish, a licensed notary in Jefferson County whose credentials had been obtained fraudulently. Howard's team pulled the state registry and cross-referenced. Gerald Parrish had no record of an October 12th appointment in Beaumont. He did, however, have a verifiable presence at a civic association meeting in Port Arthur that entire weekend, documented by sign-in sheets and photographs on the association's public Facebook page. The seal had been stolen from a man who had an alibi as solid as mine. On Saturday afternoon, I drove to San Antonio and sat down with my cousin Gerald for 3 hours. I showed him everything. Gerald had been a county sheriff's deputy for 22 years before his retirement, and he had the particular quality of a man who has seen enough human behavior to be unsurprised by most of it. He listened, asked 3 precise questions, and then said, "What do you need from me?" I told him about Monday. He said he would make some calls. Sunday evening, I drove back to Beaumont. I stopped at the store, walked through it with the lights off, past the rows of hardware that my father had helped me stock on the first day we opened, past the service counter where Lorraine had spent every Saturday for 15 years, because she said a hardware store needed someone who could actually talk to people. I stood in the back office for a while and did not turn on the light. Then I went home, took my best suit out of the closet, hung it on the door, and went to bed. I was up before sunrise. I made coffee and drank it at the kitchen window, looking out at Lorraine's garden. The September morning was cool enough that the squash along the back fence still had dew on them. She had put that garden in the 2nd year we lived here, and added to it every spring without fail, always something new alongside what she already knew. The last thing she planted, the spring before she passed, was a row of sunflowers along the east fence. They had come back this year without her, stubborn and tall, like something that had gotten the message she left behind. I allowed myself a few minutes at that window. The particular grief of standing in a place that holds someone you loved is something you do not fully prepare for, no matter how many months you have had to practice it. You only stand in it and let it be what it is, and then you button your jacket and get to work. My neighbor across the street, a retired schoolteacher named Beverly Oakes, had been watching my house since Thursday. She had not asked me why. She had known me for 21 years and understood that when I asked her to keep an eye on something, I was not asking without reason. When I had asked her to note any visitors and call me before approaching anyone who came to the house, she had said, "All right, Walter," the same way she said everything without performance, without extra words. Beverly had called me Friday evening to say that a car she did not recognize had done 2 slow passes down Sycamore Bend Road. She had written down the plate number in the notepad she kept by her phone. Monday arrived the way important days do, quietly, without announcing itself, looking the same as every other morning, until it wasn't. At 8:47, Raymond Kowalski's car pulled into my driveway, followed by Patrick's. Serena was in the passenger seat of Patrick's vehicle. I watched from inside the front window. Raymond came out first, briefcase in hand, jacket buttoned. Patrick got out next, and then Serena, in a dark blazer, her hair pulled back, looking at my house with the flat attention of someone reviewing an asset. 3 knocks at my front door, business knocks, the kind that do not ask. I opened the door. Raymond was the one who spoke first. He took in my suit, my good shoes, my expression. Something moved behind his eyes, the first small hesitation of a man whose expectation has been slightly interrupted. "Walter." He nodded pleasantly. "We appreciate you being ready. We know this isn't easy." "Come in," I said. They came in. Raymond set his briefcase on the entry table. Patrick looked around the living room the way he had been looking at rooms since this started, with the eyes of a man taking inventory. He did not look at me directly. Serena looked at me directly. She was the smartest of the 3, and she knew it, and she was already running calculations behind her professional expression. Raymond opened his briefcase and produced the folder. He laid the power of attorney on my coffee table the way lawyers lay things on tables when they want the document to do the work of speaking. "I know we talked through this on Thursday," he said. "We're here today to walk you through the transition so you're comfortable with what's happening and what comes next." "Before we get to that," I said, "there's something I'd like you to hear." I picked up the remote on the side table and pressed play. The living room filled with Patrick's voice from 4 days ago, captured by the recorder beneath my side table. Clear and close and completely recognizable. He doesn't look like a man in cognitive decline. "Ray needs to talk to Dr. Mercer again about the documentation." Serena's head turned toward Patrick with a motion that was almost involuntary, fast, and controlled too late. "The documentation's fine. Mercer signed what we needed." Patrick's face had gone the color of old concrete. He had the rigid, suspended quality of a man in the half-second between losing his footing and starting to fall. "At auction it'll move for $250, maybe $280. The land value alone is worth more than anything he's drawing from it in a year." I let it run. I let them hear every word. Serena's composure held longer than Patrick's, which told me everything I had already suspected about who had built this plan and who had simply followed it. Raymond had gone very still beside the entry table, his hand still on his briefcase, his face doing the work of a man rapidly recalculating his exposure. I pressed pause. "That recording," Raymond began, "was made in a private—" "Howard," I said. Howard Fitch came out of the hallway. Behind him came 2 people I had not introduced yet. Gerald, my cousin, carrying the quiet authority of 22 years in law enforcement even in retirement, and beside Gerald, a woman in a dark blazer who was not Serena Special Agent Diane Culpepper from the FBI's Houston field office, who had driven down Friday after Howard's call and who had spent the weekend reviewing the documentary evidence with the focused attention of someone who had spent 17 years building elder financial abuse cases. Serena looked at Agent Culpepper and then she looked at me. And for the first time since she had walked into my house that morning, her expression changed into something unmanaged and real, something that knew it had miscounted. "Raymond Kowalski," Agent Culpepper said, her voice carrying without effort. "Patrick Britten, Serena Kowalski Britten. My name is Special Agent Diane Culpepper. I'm with the FBI's Financial Crimes and Elder Fraud Unit out of the Houston field office. You are each facing federal charges under 18 U.S.C. Sections 1341 and 1343 for wire fraud and document fraud, and under Texas Penal Code Section 32.45 for misappropriation of a fiduciary property, which in this jurisdiction is a first-degree felony." She opened her tablet. "Additionally, Dr. Nathan Mercer, who has already been contacted this morning, has agreed to cooperate fully with our investigation in exchange for consideration on the fabricated medical documentation charge. He has provided a detailed account of the arrangement. Raymond said, "I want my attorney." "You'll have that opportunity," Agent Culpepper said. She looked at Patrick. Patrick was looking at me. He had the expression of a man trying to find a version of events that still works and coming up empty. His mouth opened slightly. Nothing came out. Howard stepped forward and set a second folder on the coffee table, beside Raymond's folder. "There's also the matter of the assets themselves," he said. He opened it. "The property described in your power of attorney document the residential real estate at Sycamore Bend Road and the commercial property housing Britten Hardware and Supply were moved into a family irrevocable trust 11 months ago. They are not, and have not been, for 11 months, available for transfer by any power of attorney instrument of this kind. The document you prepared does not transfer anything, because there is nothing to transfer. What you forged was a key to a lock that had already been changed." Raymond looked at the folder. The sharp professional focus in his face was doing something it was not designed to do. It was cracking at the edges, slowly, the way a surface cracks when the pressure behind it has nowhere to go. "Furthermore," Howard continued, "your power of attorney document bears a notary seal belonging to Gerald Parrish, a Jefferson County notary who was in Port Arthur on the date this document claims he witnessed Walter Britton's signature in Beaumont. We have sign-in records, photographs, and his own sworn statement to that effect." He paused. "You forged a document. You forged it with a stolen credential, and you picked a date when Mr. Britton was photographed in San Antonio at a family event with 63 witnesses and a time-stamped photo record." Gerald spoke for the first time. "I have those photographs, Raymond. I'm one of the 63 people in them. October 12th. He was cutting my retirement cake at 2 in the afternoon." He looked at Raymond steadily. "You want to see the pictures?" Patrick sat down on my sofa without meaning to. His legs made the decision, and his body followed, the way bodies do when they have been standing under too much weight for too long. He looked at the carpet. His hands were on his knees, and he was looking at the carpet with the fixed, absent attention of a man whose interior voice has stopped mid-sentence. I walked to the sofa and sat down in the armchair across from him. I let the room be quiet for a moment. "Patrick," I said. He looked up. His eyes were red at the corners. "I need you to understand something," I said, and I kept my voice exactly level, not unkind. "The night before your wedding, I sat in this living room and I thought about your mother. I thought about what she would want me to say to you if she were still here. And I could hear her clearly, the same way I could always hear her when I needed to, telling me that loving you meant not making it easy for you to make the worst mistake of your life without consequences." I paused. "So, I didn't make it easy." He pressed the back of his hand against his mouth. "She told me, 8 days before she died, to keep what we had somewhere safe," I said. "She wasn't talking about the money. She was talking about what we built. 32 years of showing up, of your mother working Saturdays behind that service counter because she wanted to be useful, of overnights and 7-day weeks and every choice we made to put something real into the world instead of just taking from it." I looked at my son. "That is what you were going to auction off for $250,000. Patrick's jaw tightened. A sound came out of him that was not a word. He looked away. "I'm not going to tell you who you should be," I said. "You're 34 years old, and that's a decision you make yourself." I sat back in my chair. "But I want you to know what you almost did. Not in the legal language. In plain words, your mother's garden is in my backyard, and her handwriting is on the shelf labels in that store's office. And you looked at all of that and saw a number." The room was very quiet. Agent Culpepper gave Patrick a long moment. Then she said, "Mr. Britton, I want to talk with you separately about what cooperation looks like in a case like this. There are meaningful differences in outcome depending on what you choose to do in the next few hours." Patrick looked at Serena. She was not looking at him. She was looking at the wall behind me with the focused inward expression of someone running the math on a situation that has stopped mattering what she wants from it. Patrick looked back at me. He said, "Did you know? From the beginning?" "Your mother told me to pay attention," I said, "so I paid attention." He nodded slowly. One small nod, the kind you make when you are accepting something you cannot undo. He stood up. "I'll talk to the agent," he said. He did not look at Serena again. He walked toward the hallway, and Agent Culpepper followed him. Raymond was escorted out by Gerald, who had spent enough years walking people to a hard stop to do it without drama. Raymond did not speak again. He picked up his briefcase out of what appeared to be pure habit, and then Gerald looked at it, and he set it back down on the entry table and walked out without it. Serena stood in my living room after the others had gone. She looked at me with the clear-eyed assessment of a woman who has always been the smartest person in the room and is in the process of accepting that today she was not. "You played this perfectly," she said. There was no warmth in it, but there was no dishonesty either. It was a statement of fact. "My wife built a good system," I said. "I maintained it." She was escorted out. Howard walked her to the door. I heard the latch click behind them. I sat in my living room alone for a few minutes. The house around me had the particular morning stillness of a place where a significant thing has just finished. The light was coming through the front windows the way September light comes in Beaumont, flat and honest, without shadows making anything prettier than it is. I went to the kitchen and poured a cup of coffee that had been sitting since early morning and was no longer hot. I stood at the kitchen window with it and looked out at the garden. The sunflowers along the east fence were full open, facing the morning the way sunflowers do, without effort, because that is what they are built to do. Howard came back in through the front door and found me in the kitchen. He leaned against the doorframe and looked at me the way men who have known each other for 19 years look at each other when something large has been resolved. "The trust documentation holds completely," he said. "There is nothing in that forged instrument that touches anything you own. The store is yours. The house is yours. Their attorneys will figure that out by noon." I nodded. "Patrick's cooperation is going to be meaningful," Howard said. "Culpepper thinks it significantly changes his exposure. The primary charges will focus on Raymond and Serena." "Good," I said. Howard was quiet for a moment. "What do you need today, Walter?" I thought about the question seriously, the way he had asked it. "I need to go open the store," I said. "Marcus and Dale are there, and they're going to wonder where I am." Howard almost smiled. He had been my attorney for 19 years, and he knew that this was exactly what I would say, and had probably prepared himself to hear it. He straightened up, tucked his folder under his arm. "I'll call you when I hear from Culpepper." "I know you will," I said. "Thank you, Howard." He went out the front door. I heard his car start and pull away. I rinsed my coffee cup in the sink. I looked at the recipe card Lorraine had taped to the inside of the cabinet above the coffee maker in 2003. The one for the pot roast with the carrots and the low-sodium broth. Her handwriting in blue ink, slightly faded now but completely legible. 4 hours minimum, she had written at the bottom of the card. "Don't rush it. It knows when you're rushing." I went to the back porch and walked down to the garden. I crouched at the base of the sunflower row and pressed my fingers into the soil the way Lorraine had shown me. Dry at the surface but still holding moisture underneath. They were all right. They would be fine through the week. I stood up. I straightened my jacket. Beverly Oaks was at her front door across the street. She raised one hand when she saw me looking. I raised mine back. She went inside, and her screen door closed behind her the way it always did, the same slap of old metal against old frame, unchanged for 20 years. Friends, I want to tell you what I took from all of this, because I believe there is something worth taking. I spent 32 years building a business with my hands and my wife's belief. I raised a son in a house where every Saturday had work in it, and every Sunday had a meal. I lived the same life after Lorraine died as I had lived with her, because she was not just someone I loved, she was the standard I measured myself against, and I was not willing to lower that standard because she was no longer there to hold me to it. What Raymond Kowalski and Serena Kowalski Britten counted on was that grief makes people careless, that a man who has lost the person who helped him think clearly will stop thinking clearly, that isolation and sadness are the same thing as vulnerability. They were wrong. Grief does not take your mind. It sits on top of it, heavily, and you carry both. And if you have spent 67 years building a mind worth carrying, it is still there underneath, still working, still watching. Here is what Lorraine would say if she were standing at that kitchen window right now. She would say, "The people who love you do not need to convince you of things you already know are true." The moment someone begins working to make you doubt your own memory, your own record, your own life, that is not love. That is someone who needs you confused for their own reasons. Trust what you know. You built it. It belongs to you. And friends, call your people. Not when something has gone wrong. Not when you need something. Call them on an ordinary Tuesday because they are alive and so are you. And that will not always be true. And the call you don't make is the one you'll think about later. If this story stayed with you, leave a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from. Share it with someone who needs to hear it tonight. And stay with us. The next story is one that will stop you mid-sentence, and you will not want to miss it. Thank you, from the bottom of my heart, for being here until the very end.